When I found out that Ecovacs had brought out a new robovac with advancements that I've been asking for years, I just had to take a look. This is the T20, and it's got almost everything from my wish list, except rather than an upgrade on the Omni X1, it's more of a sidestep, because it's got some incredible new features, but also has removed a few things that I loved from the Omni X1. But this wasn't immediately obvious, so I wanted to make a quick episode today to discuss some of the main differences with this new addition to their range. But first, let's talk about the new features that the T20 has. For me, perhaps the best advancement is the mops that automatically rise up off the ground so that it can clean both hard and carpeted surfaces within the same cycle. Finally, Ecovacs have implemented this technology. It's one of the biggest criticisms that I had on the Omni X1, because if you've got mixed floors in the house, you couldn't do everything on one cycle. You'd have to take the robot out of the station, physically remove the dirty and disgusting festering mopping pads, and then set it off again, at which point it would be in vacuum only mode. This was never a good experience, and to be honest, for my own house, where most of my downstairs is hard stone flooring, I only have a few small carpeted areas, so having to do that process just for a tiny little bit of carpet was incredibly annoying. So I'm really pleased that Ecovacs have included this, and for all intents and purposes, it actually performs really well. It uses ultrasonic sound to detect where the carpet is and then moves them up automatically. The only thing that I would say is that if you have a carpet with, I'd say, a medium to thick pile, it's very likely that the mop brushes will still lightly brush the very top because they don't raise that high. With that said, the T20 lifts its mops 9mm off the ground, which might not seem like a lot, but it's actually more than a lot of options out there with self-raising mops. Ultimately, this is because of the obvious limitations of all robot vacuum form factors. You can only raise the pads so high without increasing the height of the robot itself, which in my opinion would be a bad choice because then you wouldn't be able to go under low furniture. But you can see here that when the robot goes onto the carpet, it simply raises up those mopping pads and immediately stops them from spinning. So you aren't about to buff your priceless Moroccan rugs into oblivion, thankfully. Now, there's a fantastic setting in the app for people that do have both a mix of hard and soft floors, and that's the ability to vacuum before it mops. If you were vacuuming and mopping at the same time, like I tried on my very first test of the T20, the mops are slightly damp, and because they brush the top of the pile, it was leaving a very fine damp layer on the top, a bit like a slug smearing itself across your carpet, which was delightful. Now, thankfully, that was just because I was being a moron as usual and not reading any of the instructions. There is in fact a setting which makes it vacuum only first and then go back and mop just the hard floors, avoiding the need for damp mops slithering around on your priceless plush fireside rugs. But if you're like me and have a mixture of soft and hard flooring, that setting is an absolute godsend, and I'm so glad the guys over at Ecovacs have brought this option in. Now, this isn't the only change that they've made in relation to the mopping pads. Like the Omni X1, when it finishes its cleaning cycle and heads back to the station, it will wash the mops and remove the dirt and grime. But the T20 has a massive secret weapon in that it actually heats up the water it washes the pads with to a temperature of 55 degrees, which is excellent because hot water means that it can help break down the dirt and grime far better than with just cold water. Imagine this, getting your hands covered in excrement and then using only cold water to wash them off. It just wouldn't do the trick, would it? So although this isn't something that I asked for in my previous coverage of Ecovacs products, it just makes sense. And it's something that I'm super happy they've included in the feature set of the T20. And now I probably can't live without it. I feel that they could have stepped up a little bit further here to 65 degrees for the water heating, because according to the men in white coats, 99% of bacteria is killed off at 65 degrees. But regardless, 55 degree washing will absolutely help keep things much cleaner, and as a benefit will reduce or negate any odours as well. But then on the other hand, scientifically, sticky substances are prone to the process of gelatinization when heated above 55 degrees, which could make it harder to clean. So it looks like Ecovacs have done a little bit of a balancing act here to get the best possible cleaning process for the mopping pads. Ecovacs have also ensured that they've kept their hot air drying too, so now the station will wash the pads with hot water and then dry with hot air to reduce any damp smells that often come with mops when they've been used or left damp for too long. And it also has the added benefit of making sure that the pads themselves are dry before you do any further cleaning sessions, because as I mentioned earlier, if you have the setting to vacuum first, then the mops being wet from the previous cycle would completely defeat the object or the point of that setting. So this drying functionality I definitely couldn't live without. And actually I'm really impressed with how well these look over even a week of use. Just take a look at that. They look pretty much brand new. Compare that to how they were when I filmed the B-roll. It's unbelievable, and they've been used every day for the past week. Now, there's a couple of other subtle changes to the station, such as the ridges on the base plate, which is designed to help the robot climb into its goblin cave. Previous versions of this just had this bubble texture surface, and although that works 95% of the time, sometimes the robot would have to take a few attempts to actually climb back into it, especially if it was wet. But with that said, this is the area that the new white colour shows its Achilles heel, because the dirt stands out a lot more than on the black Omni X1, especially in my place in the middle of the countryside with 2 dogs and 2 kids bringing in all manner of disgusting things on their shoes. But colour aside, these upgrades to the base station are exactly what was needed. And it still performs all of the other functions that I loved about the Omni X1, such as the very large dust receptacle hidden in the bottom that the robot will empty itself into every time it cleans. And you've also got the dirty and clean water tanks in the top. There is actually something missing with the base station though, and that's the lack of buttons. Instead of the array of capacitive touch buttons from the X1, this features only one start and stop button on the top. So Ecovacs have instead made it so that most of the control is done through the app. I think there's a good reason for this, but I'll come back to that shortly. You'll be very familiar by now though with the application if you've been following this channel, but over the years it's gotten quite advanced. You can set up rooms, choose no clean areas, set up how many times you want the device to clean each room in turn. So for example, on a single run you might want it to go over the floor in the kitchen twice to make sure it's super clean. And actually, when it comes to the mapping function of the app, the T20 uses similar True Mapping 2.0 that's on a lot of their current robots, but it also has a new object detection algorithm called True Detect 3.0, which at first I didn't think was going to make a massive difference. The mapping and navigation on the Omni X1 is good enough, but boy was I impressed the first time I set this up. It made a complete map of the house and accurately keyed in rooms within 2 minutes, all by itself, which is insanely fast. Probably the fastest mapping experience I've come across so far. So although I haven't noticed a huge change in its behaviour during use, this increase in speed, or the setup speed, was certainly a welcome change. The actual main vacuum section has a bit of an update too. Firstly, the suction power is now stronger, around 6,000 pascals of suction, which wasn't necessarily needed, but who doesn't like more suction? And to pair up with this, they also now give you the rubber brush as the main brush, which is much, much better if you have super hairy pets like I have. It just seems to pick up more whilst at the same time tangle far less. In fact, I haven't had to untangle anything, and look at it. There's one hair currently that's tangled around it after a week of use. That's a round of applause, that is. Now, the robot itself does feature a slightly different design, which completely omits the camera that was on the front of the Omni X1, meaning no more remote driving it around and running it into my wife's foot repeatedly over and over again until she makes me a cup of tea, which is a shame. But in a nutshell, it might seem a little bit confusing. There's some amazing new additions and some fantastic new features, but then with the omission of the camera, and things like the capacitive touch buttons on the base station and a couple of other bits here and there, it means it's more of a side grade. So where Does that make this fit in within the Ecovacs range? Well, I think what they've done here is actually quite clever. The Omni X range is obviously still their flagship device, but those come with one massive downside: the price. The current gen Omni X, which is the X2, will set you back £1,300, which is not cheap by any stretch. So it looks to me like what they've done is taken some of the best features that people love about the X range, but remove some of the less used functionality, like the camera, like the extra buttons, all to reduce the overall cost, because the T20 sits at its RRP of £950. And actually, on Amazon during the Black Friday sales, which has now been and gone, unfortunately, I was able to find it with a £200 voucher, taking it down to £750. So I would advise at least taking a look at the link in the description to see what price this is currently at. Now, I'm under no illusion that this is not an expensive piece of kit, even with discount. However, I have said in the past that I've been a huge convert to robot vacuum cleaners, and this style specifically, with big rotating mop heads that scrub the floor clean, have saved me so much time over the years. That and my floors have never looked cleaner, and if the wife ever complains about some food that myself or the children have dribbled down ourselves, I can clean the floors at the press of a button. And what's not to like about that? But looking at the actual figures, put it this way: if I mopped and vacuumed every single day of my life like I have been doing with this guy, I'd spend somewhere near 109 hours a year mopping and vacuuming. With this, I can put that time into working and doing other productive activities. So for me, it pays for itself within a year without a doubt. And the fact that the T20 now offers almost flagship level functionality at a much cheaper cost than the Omni X range is bloody fantastic. And it means that more people have access to this level of incredible cleaning technology. What do you think? Have you jumped onto the robot vacuum cleaner trend? Do you have one or do you not? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do pop them in the comments below, because I'll be replying to all of your messages and comments in the next few hours. So drop down there and let me know if you have a robot vacuum cleaner already and which one you've got. I want to know if there's any that I should be checking out. And I guess if price range is still too high with this, Ecovacs do some incredibly unbelievable mid-range models that you must check out, such as the Ecovacs N10 that we reviewed earlier this year and tried to clean up a crime scene with. So make sure you check that episode out. But guys, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you back for another episode of STU'S Reviews soon.